Hello everyone, my name is Madeline and I am in my 40s. I had married Benjamin, a beautiful man, and I was adjusting to life as a wife with Benjamin's adult son from his previous marriage. His son Evan is in his early 20s and is one of the most courteous and brilliant young men I've ever met. Evan moved in with us to continue his studies, and while adjusting to our new life as a mixed family has not always been easy, we have all grown closer over time. Today, I'd want to tell you a tale that is extremely close to my heart. A day that began like any other but ended up being memorable. A day that altered everything for me. It was a sunny Saturday morning, the type of day that promised fantastic weather and enthusiasm. Benjamin had departed early for a weekend work trip, leaving Evan and me alone for a few days. I intended to spend the day doing some spring cleaning, listening to my favorite music, and simply enjoying the lovely quiet of the house without the typical bustle of life. The sun was shining. Through the windows, a warm glow across everything made the house feel cozy and inviting. The day seemed ideal for completing some chores, and I was eager to get started. I picked a casual outfit, a light tank top, and a miniskirt, just something comfortable and easy to move around in. The house was quiet, and I knew Evan was home, but he usually slept in on weekends, so I thought I'd have a few hours to myself as I hummed along to the music. I made my way through the living room, dusting the shelves, wiping down the tables, and doing my best to make everything shine. Little did I know I wasn't alone. I was being watched. Suddenly I felt a presence behind me, a weight in the air that wasn't there before I turned around startled and saw Evan standing in the chair, leaning casually against the frame. He was watching me with a look I hadn't seen before, one of curiosity, almost as though he were seeing me for the first time. His eyes lingered on me, taking in every movement and every little detail. I smiled at him, trying to shake off the flutter of self-consciousness I felt creeping up on me. "Good morning, Evan," I answered brightly, hoping that my tone didn't reveal the strange sensation developing in my chest. He blinks, almost as if he were returning to the present moment, and eventually offers me a little grin. "Morning," he said, but his expression was different. It wasn't simply a normal hello. His gaze seemed to linger on me for longer than usual, scrutinizing me with an intensity I couldn't ignore. He had something to say but did not say it. Instead, he simply observed me as I continued to clean. I could feel his eyes on me, and I have to admit it made my stomach flutter in a way I couldn't explain. Maybe it was the quiet of the house or the way the soft morning light seemed to wrap everything in a warm embrace. But in that moment, it felt like something shifted between us. It felt different, like we were in our own world, one where everything else faded away. As I dusted the higher shelves, I glanced over and noticed that Evan had come a little closer. His gaze was still fixed on me. His attention was so focused that I almost felt conscious. But the strange part was that I couldn't look away. There was something in his eyes, a curiosity, an intensity, that felt almost like he was seeing me in a way I wasn't used to. I tried to shake it off, but I couldn't deny the heat rising in my cheeks under his gaze. My tone remained light as I chatted about little things, his schoolwork, his weekend plans, just trying to ease the tension that was building in the space between us. Yet I could sense he wasn't really listening. His responses were short, distracted but thoughtful, as if he was lost in his thoughts at one point. I reached up to adjust a picture frame on a high shelf, stretching a little higher, my skirt riding up slightly as I reached. When I glanced over my shoulder, I saw Evan's eyes widen, his gaze dropping to where my skirt had risen before quickly looking away. His reaction surprised me, but I couldn't help but feel a small thrill at it. The connection between us felt almost electric, though neither of us had said anything about it. I tried to dismiss it, but my heart was racing faster now. I lost my equilibrium for a short second and stumbled before recovering. I felt his strong hands on my waist, steadying me. The contact was delicate yet solid, and as I glanced up at him, our gazes met for a brief time. The world seemed to come to a halt, and I could feel the chemistry between us, something unexpected and strong. "Thanks," I mumbled, my voice quieter than normal, as if our closeness had affected the very air around us. I could detect a little blush on his cheeks, but he did not remove his hands. Instead, his fingers lingered for just a second longer than required, and the warmth in his gaze seemed completely new. "No problem," he answered gently, his voice firm if somewhat disturbed. It seemed like we were both off balance, and the air around us appeared to buzz with the energy that was growing between us. He remained nearby throughout the remainder of the morning. We continued cleaning, but I noted how close he stayed to me and how his hand periodically brushed against mine. Each unintentional contact, each gaze we shared, seemed to amplify the unspoken intensity developing between us. We eventually finished our tasks, and I recommended that we take a rest. We sat on the couch, sipping iced coffee, but the air around us was different. We both appeared quieter than normal, possibly still processing the change that had occurred between us. I looked over at him again, and I noticed his gentle but steady stare on me, as if he was trying to say something without words. "So, do you prefer lazy Saturdays?" I inquired, breaking the pause with a friendly grin, seeking to alleviate the tension. "I do," he said, his voice heated. "It's nice spending time like this, just us." His words sent a flutter through me, and I felt my heart race. There was a tenderness in his voice, something that went beyond just a family bond, something deeper. I smiled at him, feeling the weight of his gaze on me. It wasn't uncomfortable, though it was intimate, like we were sharing something that no one else could understand. "Well," I said softly, my voice a little hesitant, "I guess it's nice to have some company. This house can feel pretty big sometimes." I hadn't realized just how true that was until now. With Benjamin gone, the usual hum of activity was missing, and there was a quiet that seemed to fill the house. The space that used to feel like home now felt empty. But it didn't feel empty when Evan was around. His eyes held mine for a moment longer than usual. "You're right," he murmured. "It feels less different." Today his voice had softened, and I could see that he was carefully choosing his words. "It feels like we're really spending time together, not just passing each other by." His words sent a rush of emotion through me, and I felt a warmth spreading across my chest. Here we were, just the two of us, alone in the quiet of the house, and it felt as if the usual boundaries had softened. It was like we were finally seeing each other in a way we hadn't before, and I couldn't help but feel my pulse quicken. We sat there sipping coffee, each glance a small spark. At one point, I leaned back against the couch, resting my arm along the back. As I did, my hand brushed against his shoulder. It was unintentional, but it felt like electricity. I felt him freeze as if he was just as aware of the touch as I was. Our eyes met, and I couldn't help but smile, a mischievous glint in my gaze. "You're usually not this quiet," I teased, trying to lighten the mood, but the warmth of his presence was nearly impossible to ignore. "Have I finally rendered you speechless?" He chuckled, his eyes lighting up. "Maybe," he replied, though his playful tone didn't hide the intensity beneath. "Or maybe I'm just seeing you differently today." His words hung in the air, and I felt my face flush. I wanted to laugh it off, to make a joke, but instead I just looked at him, my heart racing. Something in his eyes caused my breath to catch. Without thinking, I reached over and tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, a nervous habit I couldn't shake. Evan's eyes followed the movement, and before I knew it, his fingers brushed mine as he took my hand. For a moment, we both sat there, his hand warm against mine, neither of us moving. The simple contact felt like an invitation, a silent understanding that we were crossing into new territory. I could feel anticipation building in me, but also comfort, It was as if we were both exactly where we were meant to be. Madeline whispered, his voice barely audible. The way he said my name sent a shiver through me, and I leaned in, drawn in by the warmth between us. Yes, Evan, I replied softly, my voice filled with all the emotions I could barely keep inside. He hesitated, his eyes fixed on mine. I've wanted to tell you for a while, but I wasn't sure how, he remarked, his voice shaking slightly. My pulse was hammering, and I couldn't take my eyes away from him. I could feel the tension between us and unconsciously clasped his palm gently. You can tell me anything, I muttered, my voice wavering. He took a big breath and kept his gaze fixed on me. It's just that you mean so much to me, Madeline, more than I can describe. And having you like this here with me today has made me realize how much a soft grin pulled at my lips, and I felt my own heart open, the walls I'd erected around myself starting to slip away. Evan, I can feel our connection as well. I can't just ignore it. I couldn't stop the words from coming out, but once they were out, I felt strangely relieved. It was the truth, and I could no longer deny it. He drew closer, his face barely inches from mine, his hands still warm and solid. I've longed to be near you for so long, he muttered, his voice full of sincerity. I don't want this moment to pass. Everything seemed to align perfectly at that moment. It felt as if all of the barriers that had previously divided us had crumbled, revealing just the naked honesty of our affections for each other. I leaned in, my hand on his shoulder, my pulse racing as our faces drew closer, and then his lips touched mine softly, lovingly. The kiss was sweet, containing all of the feelings we had kept concealed for so long. It was a kiss that conveyed understanding, shared memories, and the subtle, irrefutable bond that had developed between us. Evan's fingers clenched around mine, as if he never intended to let go. The comfort of his touch anchored me, and the world outside the room faded away. A pleasant stillness descended between us. My palm slid down to rest on his, each beating in perfect sync with the other, and I could feel his pulse steady beneath my fingers. I realized how much we both felt in that moment. Yet it seemed natural, as if we were supposed to be here together in this calm spot. He carefully reached up, his palm warm as it stroked a stray hair away from my face. The gesture was simple yet compassionate, and as I leaned into his contact, a warm sensation surged through me. Madeline, he muttered, his voice filled with something deeper, as if he too was stunned by the connection. Yes, I inquired gently, my heart beating as I waited for him to say K again. It feels like this has been waiting to happen for a long time, he continued, his tone mild but genuine. I know it's complex, and I don't want to rush things, but I want you to know how much I feel about you and how important you are to me. My heart swelled at his words, and I grabbed his hand, feeling the warmth of his palm against my own. Evan, I feel exactly the same way. I acknowledged, my voice barely above a whisper, that I hadn't expected this, but it felt so natural as we sat there staring into one another's eyes, a wordless understanding traveling between us. My hand remained in Evan's, and I gently squeezed it before we got up together. Neither of us said anything, yet everything seemed understood. Each stride toward the doorway seemed to amplify the subtle excitement that had been building between us. We headed toward the bedroom as the evening sounds faded. As we approached the entryway, my heart raced. His hand was solid in mine. It was unfamiliar ground, but the comfort of his being alongside me took away any reservations. Evan's fingertips brushed down my arm, sending a pleasant thrill down my spine. Everything in the bedroom took on a new, intimate ambiance. The brightness from the streetlights outside softened everything, and I felt a warmth flow through me as he urged me to sit on the bed's edge. There was something exhilarating about the way he stared at me, that as if he were memorizing every detail. He kneeled beside me, his gaze never leaving mine. Madeline, I've never felt this way before about anyone, he explained. My pulse raced, and I rested my hand on his face, feeling the warmth in his flesh. I muttered, astonished by my own candor. We just stared at one another for a time, then leaned forward without saying anything else, and our lips connected again, slowly and with emotion. His hands gripped my waist, solid and warm, and I drew him closer. The world outside appeared to fade away. It was just us in that moment, as if we were lost in it. We froze. The sound of the front door unlocking broke the quiet, and my heart sprang into my throat. Benjamin was already home. Evan's eyes blazed with panic as we rapidly broke away from one another, our hands shaking as we sought to calm ourselves down. I straightened my hair and smoothed my clothing as best I could, scanning the room for any traces of the closeness that had just filled it. I gestured for Evan to retreat while I hurriedly opened the bedroom door, trying to maintain composure despite my pounding heart. Benjamin's footsteps reverberated down the corridor, becoming louder as he neared. I took a deep breath, hoping that he wouldn't notice the tension in the air. He yelled my name cheerfully, utterly oblivious to what had just happened. I managed to greet him normally and give him a short embrace while looking over his shoulder. I caught Evan's eye. He had gone to the living room, appearing as uneasy as I did. The moment had passed. Our mutual connection had been replaced by the need for secrecy. Benjamin talked about his day, unaware of what had nearly transpired. I reacted naturally, but my thoughts kept returning to the moments I had just had with Evan, times that made me doubt all I thought I knew about myself. When Benjamin eventually walked to the kitchen, I discreetly joined Evan, who was still tight at the doorway. We shared a short glance. The unspoken agreement between us was as strong as ever, and we knew we had to be cautious. The limits we had almost broken would alter everything if we didn't.